everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm talking all things thriller. Now, thrillers are really important to me because when I got into reading as an adult in 2017, thrillers were basically all that I read. You know, thrillers are really fast-paced and they make you want to keep turning the page to find out what's going to happen, and the suspense just makes you want to keep picking up the book. And so that was super rewarding as someone getting back into reading. And I'd say for a good 3 years, thrillers were the only things that I read. I wasn't interested in trying any other genres because I was so captivated by thrillers. Now, while I have branched out to reading other genres, thrillers will always remain close to my heart because they're what made me fall back in love with reading. So since I've read a fair share of thrillers, I thought today I would share with you my top 10 most favorite thrillers that I've ever read. Now, some of these may be considered other genres as well, but I'm classifying them as thrillers today because I think that that's where they belong the most. And hopefully you'll get some good recommendations if you're looking for your next thriller. First, we have one of my favorite books that I read last year, and that's I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. This is one of those books that I was saying doesn't only fit into thriller. I think it's also a little bit horror and suspense, but I'm putting it here because I'm freaking obsessed with this book. I'm Thinking of Ending Things follows a female protagonist who's going on this road trip to go see her new boyfriend's parents. So they just started dating, and so she's going to go meet his parents for the very first time. And while she's in the car going to meet her new boyfriend's parents, we're inside her head, and we can see that she's starting to have some doubts what she's doing, and she keeps saying to herself that she's thinking of ending things. This book is super claustrophobic and makes you feel super uncomfortable. I actually started reading this at nighttime, and I felt so creeped out that I had to put it down and wait until morning to pick it up again, because right at the beginning the female protagonist is talking about how there's this man outside her window looking in at her every night, and I was like, yeah, no, I cannot be reading this right now. After I finished reading this book, I just set it down and literally stared at the wall for 5 solid minutes. I'm not exaggerating. This book is so well done. You do not want to set it down. Well, unless you get really freaked out, but it makes you want to keep turning the pages to find out what the hell is going on. Now, maybe this isn't the most well-written piece of literature that exists, but it is so good. And that's what you go to a thriller for, to keep turning the pages to find out what's going to happen next. And I cannot recommend this book more. I love I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Next is another book that kind of bends genres, because this was sold as a thriller, but even when I finished it, I kind of said to myself, I don't think that this should be marketed as a thriller. I think it's more suspense. But despite that, I'm putting it on this list because I freaking love this book. But just keep that in mind, that it's more suspense than thriller, but it's very, very good. And that's The Push by Ashley Audrain. So The Push follows Blythe, who is a new mom to her daughter Violet. She's so excited to be a new mom, and her husband Fox is just the most dedicated father. But as Violet starts to grow up, Blythe starts to think that something's a little bit wrong with Violet, that she's not having this mother-daughter connection that she was expecting to have. And when she talks to her husband Fox about it, he's like, oh, no, it's all in your head. She loves you so much, and she's just a normal little girl. What are you talking about? But Blythe continues to have these doubts about something's just not right with Violet. But then Blythe and Fox go on to have a second child, Sam. And Sam is exactly what Blythe was expecting to have with Violet. Sam is super loving and cuddly and just obsessed with his mom, whereas Violet was never like that. And this actually jumps back and forth in time between different timelines, which is really interesting and well done. But something happens in the present timeline that just changes everything. And I'm not going to say too much more than that, but this book had me up until 4 a.m. I could not put it down. I had to find out what happened. Again, this is one of the best books that I read last year. Could not recommend The Push more. Next is a book that I read a good few years ago, and I still think about it, and that's The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I think I'm due for a reread because I actually just found out yesterday that Peter Swanson announced that there's going to be a sequel to this book, and I'm so excited, so I'm definitely going to be rereading this soon. So this book opens with Ted at the airport going on a business trip, and Ted finds himself drinking at the airport bar where he meets the stranger Lily. And so they're getting pretty drunk, talking about secrets and getting to know each other, when Ted then tells Lily that his wife Miranda has cheated on him. And he's really upset about it, obviously, and he even goes so far to tell Lily that he could kill Miranda for what she's done. And maybe it was hyperbole. He gets so mad he just says offhand, oh, I could kill her for what she's done to me. But then Lily's response is, I can help. So just like that, the two decide that they're going to murder Ted's wife. So the book follows them planning how they're going to kill Miranda, but I think the strongest point of this book is actually learning more about Lily, this random woman who said she's going to help a stranger murder his wife. Why would she commit to that when she doesn't even know this guy or their relationship or anything? Why would a stranger do this? So it's super interesting to learn about Lily's past and what would motivate her to do such a thing. Would definitely recommend. I still think about this book today. I can't wait to reread it. Next we have Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This book follows Jules, who's a young woman who's kind of down on her luck. She lives in New York City, and one day she gets this really interesting job opportunity. There's this really luxurious apartment building in New York City who basically hires like apartment sitters when a tenant moves out and there's nobody living there and they're waiting for the next person to move in. They don't want any of the units sitting empty, so they hire these apartment sitters to basically just take care of the space until the next person moves in. Now that's really interesting for Jules because, like I said, she's kind of down on her luck, and so this will give her someplace really nice to live in the meantime. So Jules is offered the position, however she has to accept some really kind of bizarre rules. So one rule is that she can't have any visitors over to the apartment, and the other is that she has to spend every night in the apartment. She can't sleep somewhere else. But she can't pass up this opportunity to live in this beautiful apartment building, and she accepts. While she's living at this apartment building, it's called the Bartholomew, she meets a couple other apartment sitters, and she gets to be kind of close friends with this other apartment sitter named Ingrid. But then one day, Ingrid completely falls off the map. She disappears, she's not returning any of Jules' phone calls, she's not answering the door when Jules goes to knock on the door, and the apartment manager said that she just moved out. But Jules feels like something's just not right, and she doesn't believe all these stories that she's being told about Ingrid, so she goes to investigate herself. This is another book that's just going to make you keep turning the pages to find out what happens next. There's so many twists and turns, and there's actually multiple twists which are so good, and you will definitely not be able to guess what the twists are, I guarantee it, which I love because personally in thrillers I hate when I can guess the twist. Like, I want the author to be smarter than me and do a twist that shocks me. So I love Lock Every Door. The twists are amazing. You will not guess what they are, and you'll really appreciate the twist. Next we have a book that I actually just read a couple weeks ago, and that's Pretty Girls by Karin. This is a very serious thriller. This is one of the most graphic thrillers that I've ever read, so proceed with caution. If you're beginning with thrillers, I would not begin with this one because it's pretty intense. So this book actually has like two stories going on at the same time, because on the one hand there's this storyline of Claire and her sister Lydia, who when they were younger their sister Julia went missing, and so they're still grieving from this. They never got any closure about what happened to her, and the event actually separated them and they haven't talked in a long time. And the other storyline follows Claire, who at the very beginning of the book, her and her husband Paul get mugged in this alleyway, and through the struggle Paul ends up getting murdered. So in this other storyline we have Claire who's grieving for her husband. Now you'll remember that I said that this is one of the most graphic thrillers that I've ever read, and from what I just told you, you might be wondering, well, how could that be graphic? Pick up the book and you'll find out. This was so good. It's actually quite long for a thriller, but it's so good. The twists and the turns and the storylines and everything, oh my gosh, it's so good. Would definitely recommend if you're an experienced thriller reader. Again, I would not start with this book if you're just starting out with thrillers. Next is actually the book that started it all, that got me back into reading as an adult, and that's The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. So I had gone years, I mean years, without reading. Then in January 2017, I picked up The Good Girl, and the rest is history. I think that says how good this book is. Now I would like to reread this because obviously I've read so much since I've read this that maybe my opinion would change, but this book holds such a special place in my heart because it really turned me into the reader that I am today. So this book follows Colin, who's actually been hired to kidnap Mia, who's a really wealthy, well-off young woman. And once he's kidnapped Mia, he's been instructed to take her to his boss. So Colin spends the beginning of this book kind of staking out Mia, following her, seeing when is going to be the best time to kidnap her. And then he decides that he's just going to have this chance encounter with her at a bar. And so the two meet at the bar, and Mia thinks that she's going home with Colin to have this one-night stand. But in reality, of course, Colin is going to kidnap her. Now, while Colin is in the process of kidnapping Mia and taking her to his boss, he has this complete change of heart. He decides that he's not going to take Mia to his boss, but actually take her to a cabin in the woods and keep her for himself. And so things go from there. I'm really excited to reread this book because, like I said, it's been so long and I've read so many thrillers since then, but obviously I had to have this on the list because it literally made me the reader that I am today. Next is The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapena. So this book follows the couple Anne and Marco, and one night they decide that they're going to go to a dinner party at their neighbor's house. And they have a newborn baby named Cora, but they have kind of a hard time finding somebody to take care of Cora while they go to the dinner party next door. So they decide, you know what, we're just going to be next door. Cora's going to be sleeping, you know, let's just leave her in the crib and we can go to our dinner party. We'll come back and check on her. She's going to be fine. Not a big deal. But then of course it's a thriller. Something happens to the baby. And through the process of trying to figure out what happened, Marco and Anne find out things about each other that they never knew before. So this is a domestic thriller that I would definitely recommend. So the next book is another domestic thriller, and that's Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. So this book is about the couple Grace and Jack, and they appear to be the perfect couple. Their house is immaculate, they throw the most beautiful dinner parties, Grace makes the most delicious food. They have other couples come over for dinner parties all the time, and the wives of those couples are really envious of what Grace has. But as they get to know the couple more, they start to realize a few weird things about Grace. Like, she throws these extravagant dinner parties with all this delicious food, but she never gains any weight, ever. The other women in the other couples are really questioning, like, how does she eat so much and she never puts on weight? Like, her body is perfect. Like, how does she eat like that all the time? And so, you know, that really just goes to feed into their like jealousy of Grace. And when she leaves the house, she never takes anything with her. She doesn't take a purse with her or anything. So the other couples that go to their dinner party start to question these little things, like, are we overthinking this? Like, okay, yeah, she can leave the house with nothing, but is there something there? Like, what's really going on? So anyway, this is a really good domestic thriller if you like those. And this is another one that's kind of intense. Not as intense as Pretty Girls, but it's still pretty intense, so a fair warning on that one. Next we have The Girl Next Door by J.P. Delaney. This book follows two different women in two timelines. So we have Jane in the present and Emma in the past. And both of these women have lived in the same apartment, 1 Folgate Street. And so Jane, who we're following in the current timeline, just suffered a miscarriage, so she's really upset, really grieving this loss, and she wants to start over. And this apartment that she found at 1 Folgate Street, she's really interested in. It's like an architectural masterpiece that it's really, really famous. And when she goes to apply to live there, the owner tells her that there's like 200 stipulations that she has to agree to. So for example, she's not allowed to have books in the apartment, and she can't have throw pillows and no blankets and all these different rules, because he says it would ruin the architectural like beauty of this apartment. And so obviously Jane thinks that this is weird, but she agrees to it because she's ready for this fresh start, because she thinks that this apartment is going to transform her and basically give her a new lease on life. Through some unexpected circumstances, Jane finds out about this woman who lived at 1 Folgate Street before her, whose name was Emma. So we jump back and forth in time between Jane and Emma and find out all the different reasons that Emma moved into this apartment. And so Jane starts to learn more and more about Emma and her life at 1 Folgate Street, and she kind of starts to question, is she safe at 1 Folgate Street? This book makes you feel really claustrophobic as you read it, which is obviously a plus when you're reading a thriller. I would definitely recommend this one. Next is one that you've probably heard about because it was adapted into a Netflix series and just totally blew up. Everybody's obsessed with the series, and that's You by Caroline Kepnes. Now, not to brag, but I read this in 2017, like way before the Netflix adaptation. But seriously, I kind of can't believe that I read this in 2017, way before the Netflix adaptation, because I was reading so little at that time that I actually read something that ended up being turned into an adaptation. I don't know, it just kind of blows my mind that that even happened. But I freaking love this book. If by chance somehow you've never seen the Netflix adaptation, would definitely recommend reading the book first. But if you don't know what this is about, this book follows Joe, who becomes obsessed with this woman named Beck. The way that he even found out about Beck is that he works at this bookstore, and one day she came in and bought this book, and they have this like smart, witty banter together about the books, and from there Joe is obsessed with her. He does everything to find out as much as possible about Beck, and he's stalking her friends, and is completely obsessed with her. He even goes so far to like orchestrate things happening in Beck's life. Like, she thinks it's just like life happening, it's an accident, or this just happens in life, but in reality Joe planned for it to happen. And it just takes a lot of dark turns, and it's really captivating. It makes you want to keep turning the pages to find out what's Joe gonna do next. So like I said, I loved You by Caroline Kepnes, that I even went on to read the sequel, Hidden Bodies. Now, I know that this is a recommendations video, but I just want to say that I do not recommend Hidden Bodies. This book is horrible, really bad. Don't bother. And even though I did not like Hidden Bodies, I still did not give up on Caroline Kepnes, that she could give me another Joe Goldberg book that I would love. And I bought You Love Me. Again, would not recommend. This was not good. So if you read You and you love it, just take my advice, don't bother moving on to Hidden Bodies. Just appreciate this book for what it is and love this book. So those are the 10 best thrillers that I've ever read, but I did want to add one more little bonus book, because maybe you've already read You by Caroline Kepnes and you loved it and you want something similar, and since I told you not to move on to Hidden Bodies, maybe you're looking for something else. I would recommend The Collector by John Fowles. This book was actually published in 1963, so it's kind of like a modern classic, and after reading it, I think it's like the prototype for You, because this follows Frederick, who's a butterfly like collector, that he kills butterflies and like pins them to keep them and collect them. And one day he becomes obsessed with this young woman named Miranda, much like Joe becomes obsessed with Beck. And he decides that he wants to collect Miranda like he collects butterflies. So if you enjoyed You by Caroline Kepnes and you want something similar, would definitely recommend The Collector. Or if you love thrillers and you would like to get into reading classics, I would definitely recommend moving to this first. This is a great entry into classics, and I think you would really love it if you love thrillers. So this would definitely be a good entryway into reading classics. So those were the 10 best thrillers that I've ever read, plus a little bonus book. I hope you found some recommendations and maybe found the next thriller that you're going to read. If you've already read some of these, let me know down below in the comments, what did you think of them? What was your star rating? Did you love them as much as I did? If you enjoyed this video, please like it. It would mean so much to me, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye!